Welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. I'm here with Mark Pringle. Hi, Mark.
Hello, Barney.
Yes, I'm Barney, and we're here to talk about everything that's new and groovy on Rock's Back Pages this week, starting with Massive Attack, who announced the 20th or 30th or 40th or 100th anniversary tour of the Mezzanine album, I think starting in January. How many years is it? 1998 it came out. You're going to have to work it out for yourself. Anyway, so as everyone's doing these days, they are touring this album. I imagine playing it in sequence in its entirety, and then assorted greatest hits like Unfinished Sympathy after that. So we thought we'd run two pieces from 1998 about Massive Attack, about Mezzanine, a review of Mezzanine from Mojo, and Ben Thompson talking to 3D and Daddy G. We've also thrown in, as a kind of bonus, an audio interview with the great Elizabeth, or Liz Fraser of the Cocteau Twins, who is their special guest on this tour, and of course sang on Mezzanine's probably most famous track, Teardrop. Mark, do you have any strong feelings about Massive Attack?
Well, you say Mezzanine, I say Mezzanine. Let's call the whole thing off.
That's because you're much more cosmopolitan than me.
I mean, I don't have any great strong feelings about the band. I find the Bristol scene pretty interesting in that Bristol is one of Britain's oldest black cities. It was obviously, as well-known, Colston Hall was named after a slave trader and so on and so forth. And the roots of black music in, black and white music run very, very deep in Bristol, going right back to the 70s and the early reggae sound system parties, then hip-hop and so on and so forth. So, it's an interesting scene. As an album, frankly, it bores me to tears, but there we go.
No, that's great. I mean, I have mixed feelings about Massive Attack. There's some things that are brooding and compelling about their sound for me that was there from the beginning. I loved Protection, for example, the title track that Tracy Thorn sang. So she was kind of like the original Liz Fraser. They do use guest singers very well, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
And I liked, in principle, the whole trip-hop thing and the Bristol scene, while finding a little dour and humourless. On Karma Coma, Tricky was the sort of the guest kind of rapper contributor on that track. So Tricky's a big part of this. I loved Nelly Hooper. I loved what he did on the first Björk album. So that was interesting to me, that Wild Bunch connection. And so, Bristol has become one of the great scenes, I think, historically, of British music. I certainly vastly preferred it to Britpop. But this album is all about, it's all about mood and texture and some sampling and a kind of darkness that, you either kind of like that or you don't. I love the version of Dennis Brown's song Man Next Door. I think that's my favourite track on it. I also, of course, we both love Horace Andy, who's one of their great guest singers. We've met Horace Andy once, didn't we?
Yes.
And I mean, I think he's just one of the most extraordinary singers in any genre, but certainly one of the greatest Jamaican singers.
I also like the fact that he got a sort of second career out of this. It's always nice when a guy who probably was doing very little at that point in terms of making his own records and so on and so forth, got a second wind out of this. So, admirable. Do I like it? Not terribly.
Fair enough. Let's leave it at that, and we will move on now to our featured writer of the week. So, as regular listeners will know, we have an Almost Famous section where we feature the work of one of our over 700 writers on Rock's Back Pages, and we've gone this week for our pal Terry Staunton.
Indeed.
He's been more of a pal of yours. I haven't seen Terry for a little while, but I knew him at NME back in the 80s. God forbid, is it that long ago? So we love Terry.
He's just one of the funniest people I know. our colleague Paul and myself had managed to wangle backstage passes to what was going to be an Elton John live show, free concert in the park, but Elton cancelled, I think. But Elvis Costello was there, and we bumped into Terry backstage, and he basically kept us in hysterics for about 4 hours solid. He's just quite one of the funniest people I've ever met. A sweetheart, very, very nice man, and a very, very good writer.
So we've got a piece on 9 Inch Nails that he wrote for Enemy in 1991. That's pretty early in the Trent Reznor story, and I think he calls them genuinely frightening. I don't know whether they're still genuinely frightening, but it's a great piece, an important piece. There's a retrospective piece on Echo and the Bunnymen, whom Terry has written quite a lot about over the years. We won't debate the virtues or otherwise of Echo and the Bunnymen.
No.
I interviewed them back in the day. Let's just say they didn't achieve the success of their great rivals U2. Yeah. And actually the piece that I think I've enjoyed most that we featured on Terry is a piece he wrote in Uncut in the year of Mezzanine, as it happens, which is his positive guide to cinema's greatest bands, all those wonderful kind of faux entities that cinema has coughed up over the years. Most famously, of course, Spinal Tap. Almost as famous, The Commitments. But of course, my favourite would be the Carrie Nations in Russ Meyer's immortal film Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So this is Terry writing about all these acts, of course, who didn't properly exist, except that Spinal Tap, in the end, did sort of properly exist. But so that's Terry, and there's tons more Terry on Rock's. Tons more Terry's All Gold on Rock's back pages.
One sort of interesting curiosity in your selection of his pieces is that you didn't focus at all on actually his main area of interest, which is a certain sort of British songwriter. We're looking at the Nick Lowe's of this world, the Elvis Costellos of this world. Terry has a real passion for that. Those areas of songwriting. I mean, it's not areas I'm particularly, but Terry is really, really passionate about those things and can quote at great length entire chunks of lyrics at critical moments.
Sure, well, that absolutely makes sense to me. So the audio interview of the week for Rock's Back Pages subscribers is Ms. Roseanne Cash, I believe the eldest child of Johnny Cash.
I have no idea.
I think she might be. She's certainly pre-June Carter Cash. She's not June Carter Cash's daughter.
Right.
She was Vivian somebody's daughter. We really know our stuff, don't we?
Well researched.
Yes. Well, it's an unpronounceable name, even if I could remember it.
And she comes over. It's Adam Sweeting interviews her in some London coffee shop, I think, and she comes over just really charming in interview, just delightful, roars with laughter readily. They seem to get on really well. And she's talking specifically, she just released this album, The River and the Thread, which was about the South. Now, she was born and brought up in the South, but she's actually lived in New York for,
23 years.
23.
Well, it would be 27 years now.
So she says in the interview she even regarded herself as a New Yorker before she went to New York, because culturally it spoke to her in some sort of way. But then she and her husband, John Leventhal, took a trip down south, and she started spending a lot of time in the South. She was working at a university and so on and so forth. But for a birthday present, for his birthday, he wanted to drive from Memphis to New Orleans down Highway 61. She talks about visiting the Tallahatchie Bridge, the semi-mythological Tallahatchie Bridge, and all kinds of things like that. It's really interesting stuff. And as I said, that she comes over as a really, really nice, charming...
Yeah, doesn't she just? I listened to it last night and really enjoyed it. And she talks about the North-South divide. Yep. I mean, with the midterm election results coming in yesterday in America, it was quite interesting to be listening to her take on that as someone who's actually, I think, born in Memphis, but who essentially has kind of reinvented itself as a New Yorker, certainly as a liberal New Yorker
Yes.
rather than an illiberal Southerner.
Yeah.
So the River and the Thread album, I think, won 3 Grammys.
That's right.
So
yeah.
it's been a really important record for her and her husband, John Leventhal, as you say. I mean, I listened to the album itself, and I think we both feel slightly ambivalent about Roseanne Cash, that her heart's in the right place, and she's an interesting woman. She's a thoroughly admirable woman, but the music feels somehow to me a little bit too perfect, and I felt this about John Leventhal in the past. I think he's got a sort of immaculate touch. I remember thinking this when he was producing Sean Colvin. So he produced an album on her called A Few Small Repairs many years ago, and I interviewed her a couple of times in that year, and had the same feelings about her, funnily enough, as one might have about Roseanne Cash. That I really liked her. I liked the craft of and the production of the record. There were good songs on there, but
bit bloodless.
Yeah, it feels just a little too sort of artful and contrived, and not emotionally raw enough. There's an interesting moment in the interview where she talks about Neil Young.
Yeah.
And Adam Sweeting, the interviewer, says something like, well, Neil told me, he doesn't even revise his lyrics. And she sort of goes, oh, I couldn't do that. I mean, I'm a chronic reviser. And in a way, well, she is, and that's the difference.
Yep.
Sometimes with Neil Young, it doesn't work, but there's something about Neil's kind of almost subconscious, intuitive approach to writing. You feel that it's really coming from this quite sort of dark place. Whereas with Roseanne and John's music, it's maybe a little too cerebral, which is kind of ironic when it's supposed to be about the gritty, earthy, funky sound.
Yes. I think that's right. I mean, it was interesting when we listened to it in the office a couple of days back. One song had a pedal steel in it and instantly perked you up because it had some instrument which sort of broke through this overall kind of slightly flat tone of immaculate production, it was nice enough. But anyway, the interview's great. She's lovely, and it's really, really worth listening to.
I don't have a problem with sort of perfection per se.
Don't you?
Actually, I don't, because sometimes it really works for me. I think of someone who, is loosely in the same Americana bag as, say, Roseanne Cash, and that's Alison Krauss, whose music is sort of so immaculate, and many would say a sort of airbrushed Newgrass, or an airbrush version of, it doesn't have that kind of, it's not Roscoe Holcomb, it's not raw Appalachia. But for me, Alison Krauss is such an extraordinary singer that I could just listen to her sing almost anything. I don't think Roseanne is really a distinctive enough voice.
That's fair.
For it to sort of, for it to work, for you to be able to say, I can accept it. So I think that's how we kind of feel about Roseanne. And I mean, one might also say, going back, that she paved the way for people like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's transition from country into pop, because what Roseanne was doing in the 80s was kind of bridging quite formulaic pop rock with a kind of country twang. There were some great songs. I mean, 7 Year Heartache, I Don't Know Why You Don't Want Me. These are songs I remember that I loved. They sound a little bit generic now.
I suspect Terry Staunton's quite a fan of Roseanne Cash.
We'll get Terry in sometime and we'll ask him. So there we go. That's the audio for this week, and now we will turn our attention to the cornucopia of content that has found its way into the RBP library. And I'm going to bring in our chief archivist at this point.
I mean, there's as always, there's a lot of really good stuff this week. A few things really caught my eye. Maureen Cleave, who we got on board a couple of years back, very hard to find her writing because she wrote for the Evening Standard, which, as far as we're aware, hasn't been archived anywhere. Famously wrote about the Beatles. But she had a few pieces run in American newspapers. One was about Joan Baez visiting England, and she's got a nice kind of sharpness, as Maureen Cleave. She said, it said in Time magazine in 1962 that she often wore canvas clothing and lived in a hut in the desert with mud oozing under the door. She was the darling of the smart, young, intelligent Americans who seemed to be doing and thinking all the right things. What one heard of her was admirable but unendearing. Then Miss Baez arrived in London to do a singing tour of Britain. She has indeed striking good looks and a voice of unearthly beauty. But she also has a loud, hearty, reassuring laugh and some agreeably indiscreet remarks to make about other folk singers. So Maureen describes how she's won over by the character of Joan in the flesh, rather than the image of her as a slightly pious.
Yes.
And it's Maureen writes like a dream. It's a really
Great.
Really nice piece.
Great.
Another piece again from 1966. The always admirable Dawn James interviewing Steve Marriott, and it's quite interesting because we forget it now, but a lot of people thought that pop music, with capital P, in 65, 66 was in something of a crisis, that the old bands who'd been selling lots of pop music were breaking up or whatever. And Steve Marriott actually, as an insider and as a musician, flatly contradicts this viewpoint. Steve doesn't agree with pop critics who say that the pop scene is dead. He suggests they're looking in the wrong places. In fact, it's never been more exciting than it is right now, he said. So much is happening. The Revolver LP by the Beatles has spurred everyone on yet again. The standards are getting higher and higher, thanks to them, and groups like the Beach Boys. Great new sounds are emerging. And he's absolutely right. The 66 is probably one of the key years when the album becomes an entity rather than the single and so on and so forth. And so it's really interesting reading that debate going on in 1966.
I saw that quote you posted on the Facebook group, and I thought, that really does tally with the sense I think we all have that the Beatles, Dylan, the Beach Boys, and others really did start to use the album as more than just a collection of discrete songs.
Absolutely. And so it's very interesting that Steve Marriott, who is in a pop group, I mean, the Small Faces were regarded as an out-and-out pop group, is looking around him and seeing all this very interesting stuff. And about 18 months later, his band Do Ogden's Not Gone Flake, which is one of the
great
album.
sort of concept albums, isn't it? Really?
And he's a guy, he's in the scene, but he's aware of this new seriousness and this new brilliance sort of emerging. So that's great. Moving on to 73, Andrew Bailey and Rolling Stone interviewing Marianne Faithfull. It's pretty sad stuff. I mean, she claims at that point that she's off the heroin, but, was she? We don't know. And it's basically about her as a recovering addict, the whole piece. And she says, I know it sounds absurdly naive to say that Swinburne and Baudelaire and people like that affected my thinking, but I know they did. Even when I was in hospital, I was still reading Edgar Allan Poe and getting a strange kind of decadent thrill out of my situation. I didn't just want to die, I wanted to die in a maelstrom way, to take the De Quincey path to its extreme. I know it's extremely childish, but that's what I thought. It's not as if I produced anything. At least Baudelaire wrote Les Fleurs du Mal. Of course I didn't go into it with the idea of producing anything, but I did go into it with these Dorian Gray opium dens and things in my mind. Well,
I love the idea of blaming heroin addiction on Algernon Swinburne.
It had to be done.
That great junkie. But no, I mean, I suppose many people like Marianne would say that something like Les Fleurs du Mal had some input into their idea that doing something like heroin was cool.
Yeah.
So those were Marianne's sitting on the wall years, weren't they?
That's right.
Sitting on the wall.
Lots
you
Road.
Know where that wall
Lots
was.
Road. It's
Yes.
Stadium Street or Lots Road. And she's also, and she talks in the article about street scoring in Gerrard Street and so on and so forth in Soho. And,
that's right.
And she's pretty much on her uppers at that.
She really was she just became a kind of West End junkie of the kind you would see walking up the Charing Cross Road or along Shaftesbury Avenue in that era.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, it's timely because she has her new Keatsian named album, Negative Capability. In fact, I just saw there's a video that's just gone up on YouTube of that other great substance abuser Nick Cave interviewing Marianne about this new album. He has input into this record.
Yeah.
He's written a song for her. She gets everyone to write songs for her every time, bless her. You know, and Marianne calls. Marianne needs a song. But so there's some footage of Marianne in the studio singing, and then Nick speaking with her.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be a friend of, I still am a friend of John Mayall's sons when I was at school, and we'd go around to their mum's place, their mum's place, and mum would answer the door and say, "You've got to be very quiet. Marianne's upstairs and she's not feeling very well," which basically meant she was nodding out and smack up in the bedrooms and stuff.
And feeling very well.
And she eventually flooded their house by nodding out in the bath with the bath still running, and that, I think that's when they turfed her out. But anyway, she's turned into a kind of fairly magnificent grand dame of British pop, hasn't she? And and her survival was an entirely welcome thing. And
absolutely,
and she's made one or two really decent records.
She's a great diva. She's a great sort of lovey in her way.
Yeah.
There's sort of the aristocratic sort of element. It's irresistible. It was irresistible to Mick Jagger.
Well, quite.
And it's still irresistible to people like Nick Cave. Bless her.
Yeah. So, right, moving on a couple of years, Kraftwerk's first tour, I believe, of the UK in 1975. And Carl Dallas, who normally wrote about folk music for the Melody Maker, but he had a sort of sideline passion for krautrock, and he did a very, very good interview with them, and they just come up with a couple of really interesting lines. "We're not part of the musical world anyway. Düsseldorf is not a musical town, and we're not part of the musical movement." That's Ralph Hutter speaking. The musical movement, I think he's referring to krautrock. He's specifically divorcing...
Which was already a term in use in 75, for sure.
He just also said that the music plays itself sometimes because with repeated rhythms we can go into a sort of trance. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely right. And I just love nice quote from Florian Schneider saying, "Although we do nothing, we always feel like dancing. We feel our whole body and our whole nervous system through our fingers, and through them we feel our music." It's a great snapshot of a very interesting band at a very interesting point in their career. Autobahn had just been a big hit, a year before, or that year, 70, maybe it's 75.
I think it was that year. It was either 74 or 75. I think it may have been released in 74, but it was a hit in America, of course, in 75, I think.
Weirdly, that song put me off Kraftwerk for years.
I can understand that. It's kind of irritating.
It really irritates me.
It's certainly not my favourite Kraftwerk song.
And, I've actually gone back and revisited them in recent years and found great swathes of really interesting stuff. It's funny how the other artist where that happened was Kate Bush. I couldn't abide Wuthering Heights as a record. And so I just dismissed her entirely for years. And again, she's someone I've revisited and found really some really fabulous stuff in her back catalogue. So, don't be like me in that respect.
yeah, exactly. Give it a little time. Don't dismiss artists too prematurely. What have you got for me next?
Oh, this is brilliant. Susin Shapiro reviewing what was claimed to be Johnny Thunders and Heartbreakers' last ever gig, though in fact I do believe they resurrected
This is
themselves.
Village Voice, 1978.
That's right. And she's withering about the appalling state, talking about junkies, the appalling state Thunders has got into. She says, "But the man is weak, defeated, unable to quell his morbid instincts. His body still moves, barely, in galvanic twitches, but his vacant eyes are on a nod. His skin is wasted grey like he lives under a rock." Then the very last paragraph says, there was no encore. The MC tried to rouse one, but the crowd laid low, even knowing they would never see the Heartbreakers perform again. Nobody was fooled, not the band, not the customers. It was a depressing debacle, the night Johnny Thunders died.
Except he didn't die. But he did die prematurely later, of course, in New Orleans.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me because I didn't see Johnny and the Heartbreakers at that time, but I did see them in London in the early 80s, and I found him oddly mesmerising for a number of reasons I won't go into. But I did see a few of the gigs that he and Jerry Nolan were doing. Both had been the New York Dolls, of course. They'd do these gigs around London, essentially to pay for their heroin habits. And there were nights that were just completely disastrous, and there were some which just sort of still had this this kind of ersatz, decadent kind of, glamour about them almost. And I managed to persuade him to do an interview, but it required the scoring of a 1/4 gram of heroin, which I then had to submit as expenses to NME. I've written about this, and I've recycled this story so many times, but hell, why not do it once again? And I talk about it in a book called Never Enough. So the day that Johnny Thunders came to tea in a flat where Nick Cave lived, I really, you can just join the dots, really. Johnny was almost kind of gouging out during the conversation, so the piece I ended up with was lacking in great quotage, as we would say here. And then I still remember putting an expenses claim down on Deputy Editor Phil McNeil's desk and him looking daggers at me. £25, 1/4 gram of heroin, Johnny Thunders interview. Anyway, Johnny, what can one say about Johnny Thunders? And he kind of took that idea of the kind of the fucked up junkie. So now we've managed to get rid of our clean lyric status in one fell swoop. But Johnny was kind of like a version of Keith Richards. With, I don't know, maybe a little bit of James Williamson in there, so he took that kind of Stones, Stooges thing, and just, he had just this amazing kind of Brooklyn, Italian, New York attitude as well. I mean, he was fabulous in his way. Not the world's greatest guitarist, but those Dolls riffs and even stuff he did on Heartbreakers and his solo things, they really laid down some kind of template, certainly for Steve Jones and the Sex Pistols. The Dolls were so important. Thunders was a true kind of junkie punk icon.
Yeah. I actually did see the Heartbreakers in the Music Machine in Camden Town, I think, in 1977, something like that. They weren't much good. It was probably just a bad night. Jerry Nolan was terrific. He was a very, very sharp... Good drummer. But, I just thought they were kind of an ersatz Rolling Stones in a way. And, I wanted to like them. I went away disappointed. But anyway, I think this is a really interesting live review of a man in a particularly bad place. Last thing I think I'll talk about is a live review of Suede by Simon Price. Now, one of the we touched on this when we were talking about Neil Kulkarni's review of, what was it last week? I can't remember. Anyway,
Wu-Tang Forever.
That's Wu-Tang Forever. It's mad enthusiasm. I kind of don't think that objectivity has much place in rock and roll journalism. The stuff I like to read as part of my job is the stuff which has that rush of joy and energy, or venom, anger, and so on and so forth.
You do like your venom.
I do like my venom. This is great. This is basically Simon Price falling in love with Suede, a fairly early London gig in 1992. And he ends up saying, best new band in Britain? They'll never live it down. But just watch them live it up. Walking on the wild side with an E at the end as an Oscar, riding the chariot of the gods through the last days of Constantinople, generally booting the grime of the world in the crotched ears. Oh, you pretty things. And it's just, it's fabulous, and he just pulls you into the room watching this band, and the band are massively confident and flamboyant. He talks about Bernard Butler as being the best guitarist he'd seen since Jimi Hendrix, and he was only one when he saw Jimi Hendrix, and it's just, it's not objective reportage. No. It's almost fandom,
It's fanboy hyperbole of the highest order,
which I like.
Which we like a bit of now and then.
I do.
There's room for it.
I do think that there's a tendency, particularly, I don't know, certain American magazines where there's a sort of idea that there is an objective truth about a record. And I don't really believe that, or a band. I don't think there are objective truths about music. I think that our responses are always much more visceral and much more immediate than that. And it's something that I really enjoy reading. It's great. I got a buzz reading the live review. If I'd read that at the time, I'd have gone to see Suede the next opportunity I'd have got.
Well, I did like Suede. I broadly do like Suede's music, and I interviewed them very early on and saw them very early on. And even if I thought, the Drowners and Metal Mickey were sort of hodgepodges of bits of Bolan and Bowie, and it seemed like this kind of retro glam synthesis. I still think they're pretty great records.
Yes.
They're still going and they're still interesting. And I've heard that Brett Anderson's book is really good. Coal Black Mornings, I think it's. I certainly preferred them to Oasis. They just seem to be, much more kind of like what Simon Price just wrote about.
Yes.
You wouldn't write that kind of thing about Oasis.
No.
There was nothing about Chariots of the Gods there.
We just kind of sort of dismissed Britpop earlier, but this Pulp and Suede both brought an enormous amount of style and interesting stuff to the party. To some extent, you could say that about Blur. I mean, beyond that, there was just swathes of ghastly band blokes with guitars just churning out sort of,
it was really numbing stuff, I think. And I have to say, I thought Oasis were pretty. We won't get into that now. It's just we haven't got long enough. I would just want to comment on a few other things that I noticed, and at least skim read. And the first piece in the list is by Geoffrey Cannon, who we're so delighted to have. I mean, Geoffrey was one of the first, as it were, broadsheet mainstream writers on pop culture in the wake of people like Colin McInnes. So there were writers in the 50s, but Geoffrey was one of the first sort of Guardian / New Society writers to take this new kind of teen phenomenon seriously and not just be terribly kind of high-minded and aloof about it.
Absolutely.
So there's a very interesting piece from 1963 about the teen scene and pop with a capital P, which is great.
Well, he essentially sort of defends the right of teenagers to have their scene, to love this stuff, and he says, what's wrong? Why are you, that is you being the establishment, the adults, being so disapproving? We've got to remember that if you were a teenager in the early 60s, chances are your parents had been actively through the war and through austerity, and Britain was a pretty bolted down sort of place at that time, and there was kind of very ponderous notions of how you should behave and so on and so forth. And so Geoffrey's just kind of welcoming this new sort of fabulous enthusiasm for stuff, and also don't knock the music that they're shrieking about either.
Completely.
It's a terrific piece.
Two, not one but two pieces that concern the great Lydia Lunch. Lydia also sort of swims into that whole can of kind of Nick Cave, Johnny Thunders and all of that stuff, and I knew Lydia a little bit back in the early 80s as well, and always thought she was terrific value. There's a review of Harry Cruise, or The Harry Cruise, named after that sort of scurrilous beat writer. So she had this group, Harry Cruise, and they played the Mean Fiddler in 1988. So that was one of Lydia's many musical iterations. But there's also quite a substantial interview with Lydia by Everett True from Plan B magazine from 2005. And she's just a great interview. And it just reminded me of how transgressive and out there she was, and the risks she took, and how just what a sort of important avant-garde figure she was. Teenage Jesus and the Jerks were
Eight-Eyed Spy.
Great.
I'm a fan. She's made a lot of records over a number of years.
We love Queen of Siam.
We love Queen of Siam is a fantastic record, and I just find her so interesting. She's part of a really fabulous New York scene, sort of no-wave scene in the late 70s, very early 80s. And, at a time when post-punk was interesting, but frequently pretty dour, I personally found something enormously invigorating in the stuff that's coming out of New York, whether it's James Chance and the Contortions.
Absolutely.
Too Many Freaks, who's
the Bush Tetras.
Bush Tetras,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, who they were friends of hers.
Creeps, actually, too many creeps.
Yes,
yeah, not enough freaks.
Not enough freaks.
Too many creeps. Yeah.
I have a lot of time for Lydia Lunch. I think she's really
another great New York lady. Just en passant mentioning this, there's a great interview with Cherry Vanilla.
Oh, right.
From 2011 by Rob Hughes, and it just goes into, you know, all the outrageous things that she got up to when she was working for Main Man.
That's right,
and,
yeah.
Bowie, and her very important role in that New York scene, both as a publicist, as a singer, as a scenester, as a self-confessed groupie. And I think she had just published her autobiography in that year. So Cherry Vanilla, that's worth a read too. And then just a few other things that I loved that I sort of supervised, as it were, in terms of getting them into the library was a piece about George Jones's great album, The Grand Tour, by Andrew Muller. So it's a retrospective appraisal of one of Jones's greatest records. And, you know, I think we both might broadly agree that George Jones was the greatest male country singer of them all, probably.
I would say that. I'd say specifically of ballads. I'm less interested in his up-tempo stuff. But he was just the most astonishingly soulful singer of ballads like "Good Year for the Roses," songs like that. But his extraordinary voice, almost pinched, very white. You know, it's an extraordinary sound. You know?
He does extraordinary things with his voice.
Yeah.
You know, that no other country singer has ever done. I think, and you know, he gets major props from a lot of soul and blues singers in America. You know, he's kind of like the idea of the white man's blues.
I was probably introduced to him, oddly enough, by Elvis Costello. In that it was Elvis Costello's almost blue country album that he cut in Nashville with, and that had "Good Year for the Roses" on it. So I sort of retraced my steps from there, and that's where that was my gateway drug to George Jones.
Well, the Grand Tour is a sort of concept album, and the idea is that you are taking a grand tour of this house where a divorce is taking place. He's walking you around and showing you everything that he's going to have to either sell or give to his wife.
I mean, it's great. I mean, when my old band was recording in Muscle Shoals in 1987, we used this bass player called Bob Ray, who played on Patches by Clarence Carter, was one of the famous subsequent rhythm sections. And he had moved up to... He was basically become a Nashville kind of A-list bass player. And he recounted cutting an album with George Jones where they never saw him. They'd come to the studio every day, fill in their musicians' union forms, get paid and go home, because George just never showed up.
No Show Jones.
No Show Jones.
Possum.
Yeah, Possum.
Well, you know, I was lucky enough to see George Jones perform once at the Hammersmith Odeon with Tammy Wynette. So they did a, you know, it was like,
wow. That sounds fantastic.
And I mean, I have to say, so this would have been mid 90s. Mm-hmm. He was still singing brilliantly, really up to the end. Despite everything he'd done to his mind and body with drugs and drink, I think he was, I don't know whether he was sober at that point, but he was singing like a dream. And I don't think he ever didn't sing well, except when he didn't show up at all.
That'll do it. A great voice.
So that's, you know, those are among the gems that are on offer to you as a subscriber. Come and have a look at Rock's Back Pages and see what else we've got there. Every week we add a minimum of 50 interviews and reviews, and there's just a wide variety, very eclectic selection every week, masterminded by Mr. Mark Pringle. And so we are going to love you and leave you now with a short excerpt from the interview with Roseanne Cash by Adam Sweeting. This was done about 4 years ago. And Mark, just tell us what she's talking about.
She's talking about revisiting the South and the Tallahatchie Bridge and That's what she's talking about.
Take it away, Roseanne.
It's a strange and peculiar place, but not everyone. I mean, my husband is a native New Yorker, and he's always been mesmerized by Southern music and the myths of the South, because they're very rich. Besides the bad stereotypes, the Delta gave rise to, every roots musician owes a debt to the Delta and to Appalachia. And the writers who came from there, William Faulkner, Harper Lee, Tennessee Williams, you start thinking about what is it about this little piece of the earth? And you're talking about Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee. But it was incredibly inspiring to go back and kind of see these places for the first time with new eyes. And see them through John's eyes, too. It's not that he had never been to the South, but we were immersed in a lot of different things in these trips since 2011.
Yeah. So what made you take these trips?
A couple of things. It was like a perfect storm of reasons to go down south. One is that Arkansas State University wanted to buy my dad's boyhood home.
Yeah.
So they asked if I would be involved, and I said yes. So I started going down to see the house, organize these fundraisers to restore the house. And I happened to meet up with my cousins in Memphis. Seeing my dad's house, it was almost falling to the ground.
Yeah.
I started thinking about how hard my grandmother's life was. No electricity, raising 7 children, picking
So
cotton.
it's really a pretty basic kind of house, shack type of place.
Well, a cottage. It
Yeah.
was a cottage, yeah. And then at the same time I was going to Alabama my friend Natalie Shannon was teaching me to sew. She has this beautiful workshop there. And all of these things started happening, and then John says, for my birthday I'd love to drive down Highway 61. So we went from Memphis to New Orleans in 4 days. Played a show at Tipitina's in New Orleans at the end of that trip. And it was just, all of it was like being immersed in these elemental, mythic situations, music, characters. When we got back away from it and had some objectivity, we started writing the songs.
What is this about the Tallahatchie Bridge? What does this bridge mean? Up with the Bobby Dreadful thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it means. I just know it.
It's sort of mythic sort of
It is
thing
mythic.
about it. Yeah.
And I thought that it would be this enormous structure, overpowering.
Yeah.
It's just this little bridge. Just a little bridge. Totally empty. We sat on it for half an hour. And then John snapped this picture from behind that became the album cover. It was unbelievable to go there.
But it's near Money Road and
Robert Johnson's Way.
Yeah. So
And where Emmett Till was murdered. The civil rights movement began.
Yeah.
So, it was like a vortex. You can't understand why so much came from this one spot. And then down the road is Dockery Farms. Have you heard of Dockery Farms? It was the largest cotton plantation in Mississippi in the 30s, 40s. And all of the great blues musicians worked on this cotton farm. Howlin' Wolf, Charlie Patton, Pop Staples. And they would sit on the porch of the juke joint at night and play music and pick cotton all day. I know. And it's not a functioning cotton plantation anymore, but this friend of ours whose grandfather was Will Dockery, who owned it, is restoring it. And I'm actually going to go down and play a concert there this summer.
You just heard an excerpt from Roseanne Cash in conversation with Adam Sweeting, concluding this week's Rock's Back Pages podcast. The presenters were Barney Hoskyns and Mark Pringle, and the producer was Jasper Murison-Bowie. You can find all the articles featured on the show and thousands more, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.